welcome to TRT World. I'm Hassan coming to you live from Damascus. This weekend it will be 3 weeks since the collapse of the Assad regime, an event many Syrians feared may never come. They're still coming to terms with their sudden freedom, and Fridays have become a key day to show unity and a collective attempt to reconcile with the horrors of the past. Now the interim administration is steadily establishing its control of a country that has lived through half a century of oppression and 14 years of civil war. But with mass graves being discovered almost on a daily basis, the scale of the human catastrophe is unparalleled. The number of missing is still unknown, with Syrians struggling with the uncertainty of the fate of their loved ones. And today we saw some unprecedented scene unfold here in Damascus. There were Friday prayers at the Al-Umayyad Mosque, which was attended by thousands of people. And about an hour ago or so, the administration wrapped up a military parade at the square that you're seeing on your screens right now, the Umayyad Square. To talk more about this, let me bring in TRT World's Ubaida Hito, who joins me live here on the set. Ubaida, you were at the mosque when the Friday prayers were happening, of course. These prayers come right after we saw tensions in the area of Tartus, which is perhaps one of the biggest challenges the interim government has faced since coming into power. Tell me, how was the atmosphere over there?
The atmosphere was extremely positive, and I think that people were really reconciliatory. People want to feel safe, they want to feel comfortable, they want to feel happy. They don't want more violence, they don't want more conflict. This sermon itself was about Syrian unity and accepting of all different ethnicities and religions in Syria, welcoming everybody into the Syrian community, into the Syrian nation, if you will, to avoid sectarianism. These were the messages that were in the Friday sermon, and following the Friday sermon, people left the prayer hall in large crowds, chanting and rallying, calling for continued freedom, and rejoicing over the fact that Bashar al-Assad is gone. He's no longer the dictator that was choking the life out of this country. Everybody that you speak with has bad memories and has a lot of angst towards what happened to them over the last several decades. Some of them got the worst of it over the last 14 years, but some people here in Syria have been struggling for more than 5 decades dealing with this very tyrannical regime.
Indeed, and Ubaida, I want to bring our attention to the pictures that our audience is seeing on their screens right now. These are scenes from earlier today when the interim government held a parade at the Umayyad Square. Of course, the parade has wrapped up, but we can still see huge crowds right behind us. Of course, there are fireworks happening as well. Ubaida, one question here. What kind of message do you think the interim administration was trying to send with that parade by having soldiers here right in the heart of Damascus?
I think them doing this right at this time when there's all this security instability in certain provinces like Homs and Hama, Tartus, Latakia, as well as Halab, and even here in Damascus, there are pockets of Assad regime loyalists that are trying to destabilize the situation. They're actually opening fire at the security forces, even in some cases at civilians. They're actually organized, and they're not just small groups. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of Assad loyalists that still haven't turned themselves in. So this march that they did through the Umayyad Square is definitely a show of force. But while they're doing this show of force here amongst the civilians, I think this message is more geared towards the general population, that we're here, we're strong, we're capable, we have numbers, and we're committed to everybody's security. At the same time, the government has been making a very strong show of force in those places where these Assad regime loyalists still continue to operate and exist. Large convoys left from Damascus even came from Northern Syria towards some of these problem areas yesterday overnight, and through the morning there were extensive security operations here in Damascus as well as all these other provinces that we've mentioned. Yesterday night, a group of 300 Assad regime loyalists actually turned themselves in as part of these security operations. So definitely the message here is to the general population: people should stay calm, enjoy this moment of freedom that people are enjoying. It seems like it's going on now for 3 weeks, but at the same time, we're here, we're strong, and we're going to be coming after anybody who's going to stand against the will of the people.
Indeed, and I believe that message has resonated in a positive way with the people, because we did see people out on the streets here, and coming from my hotel to the square, I saw people from all walks of life, the elderly, women and children. children, everyone came to the square holding a Syrian flag in his or her hand. Now, Ubaida, certainly the interim administration right now is facing multiple challenges. You have security, you have the economy, you have finding missing persons, but you are someone who has covered the Syrian conflict very closely. Even prior to the fall of the Assad regime, you used to travel to Syria to report on the developments here. And of course, you were here on the day when the regime fell. If I were to ask you, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the administration right now? How do you explain that?
I would say the biggest challenge they have right now is to gain legitimacy, both here inside the country and in the international community. This interim government has come into control of Syria with a lot of baggage. Half of the country is displaced, 6 million people internally displaced. The rest of the another 4 million people outside of the country are displaced. The people living inside the country are living underneath the poverty line. The infrastructure is completely damaged and destroyed. People want to see a government that's going to bring something to the table, that's going to deliver. And in order for this interim government to move forward with this transition phase, write a new constitution, and go forward with elections, they need international legitimacy. They need international recognition as well. And that's not mentioning all of the international funding they're going to need, also the financial support they're going to need to get this country back into shape.
Because according to estimates, the cost to rebuild Syria is in hundreds of billions of dollars, and certainly the administration here needs international support. To what extent the international community is going to help them, well, that is something that remains to be seen. And Ubaida, one other issue that the administration is facing, perhaps the country is facing, is the problem of missing persons. Stay with us, Ubaida, because families of detainees and missing people have been protesting at Hijaz Square here in the Syrian capital, and hundreds of thousands of Syrians are estimated to have been killed since 2011. That's when Assad regime's crackdown on protest spiraled into a full-scale war. And according to one U.S. estimate, more than 100,000 people have been disappeared and were tortured to death by the Assad regime. TRT World's Bassem Bonani was at the demonstration, and I spoke with him earlier.
I'm at the old Hijaz railway station here in Damascus downtown, and just behind me we have this gathering where people are remaining silent just to express their solidarity and sympathy with missing people, families. We see pain on the faces, actually. This is one of the most staggering parts of the Syrian tragedy. We see names, we see photos of missing people. There is some consolation that people are now able to gather and to talk loudly about this tragedy. That's extremely astonishing. It was really unthinkable a couple of weeks ago, but people are really urging the new administration to establish the truth, to give some way out for these people who are still suffering. You know, when people are killed or dead, it's over. But when people are missing, there is always a hope, even a slight hope for them to retrieve their loved ones. So we can safely say that this is one of the strongest stories we have to deal with here in Syria. We can see, as I said, it's a moment of unity, of sympathy, of solidarity, but also it's a moment of pain for all these people. So it's really painful here. It's really moving moment for these people. And actually one of the main concerns here is that we don't really know how many there are. Estimates range between 135,000 to 165,000, but it's not a matter of numbers actually, but how they can find their loved ones.
All right, welcome back. Now, Ubaida, as we were watching in Bassem's report, Hundreds of families were gathered here in Damascus today holding pictures of their loved ones. Now the problem here is that these families don't know whether or not their loved ones are dead or alive. I know there are reports out there that Assad regime loyalists have removed records of these people. So it's really difficult to find out what really happened to them. So at this stage, Ubaidah, correct me if I'm wrong, at this stage, it's very unlikely that the truth will be found about these people because it's a bit too late.
I think it's too early to say that nobody will be found, but it's very unlikely that thousands and thousands of more people will be found alive. What's clear is that the regime did execute people who were being detained and then bury them in mass grave sites. The International Commission on Missing Persons says that there are at least 66 mass grave sites around Damascus and other parts of Syria. In those mass grave sites, there are hundreds to thousands of people who aren't identified. Going through that process is going to take a long time. You need 3 family members from each body found and take DNA samples from them and match it with the DNA sample from the body. All of this is very technical work, and it's going to be very intensive. The UN has established a special task force to do this, but as I said, there's at least 66 mass grave sites with thousands and thousands of people in them. Now, many people still have hope that they're going to find somebody alive, but the biggest hope now for, I think, most of these families that still know that their family members are missing is to find just the memory of them, maybe put them to rest, to bury them, even if there's only small parts of their body left, to bury them, because we understand now, after we've seen Naya, that the regime actually got rid of people in the most gruesome ways, even crushing them into basically a grind, you know? So there may not be much left of these people, some of them at least, who were executed by the Assad regime. And people have not been struggling just now. This didn't just start for them on December 8th. These families have been trying to get information about their relatives for years.
For over
some
a decade,
of them paying large amounts of money to try and reach that information, and then being turned away.
This is this one thing that I find mind-boggling. You know, mass graves are being discovered here almost on a daily basis, and according to estimates, hundreds of thousands of bodies could be in those graves. Now, prior to the fall of the Assad regime, Damascus was not a ghost town. People were living here, restaurants were open, right? So how come at the time locals here were not aware about these mass graves? Because what I find likely here is that people knew about them, but they were too scared to speak out.
Absolutely. I met several eyewitnesses to burials in these mass grave sites. I visited several mass grave sites while here in Damascus, and people who were eyewitnesses to the process told us that we were too scared to say anything. If we said anything, we would be killed immediately and pushed into the grave ourselves. I even met one young lady who actually witnessed the entire process, executions and burials, and she said she had actually had to hide herself in the graveyard where this mass grave site is, and to stay quiet for several hours while this happened. So people were living in a state of fear, a heightened state of fear. There was no way that anybody could come out and speak out about something like this, whether they had first-hand information about it or they just thought something like that was happening.
Ubaidah, fascinating insights. Thanks very much for joining me here on our special set. I really appreciate your taking out the time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Syria's new administration is transitioning away from decades of brutal dictatorship, and security is one of the biggest challenges. And there has been progress in many parts of the country. Tel Rifat is the latest city in the north liberated from the PKK-YPG terrorist group. For more on this, let's bring in TRT World's Hassan Abdullah, who joins me live from Tel Rifat. Hassan, good to see you. So, of course, Damascus is a place which saw the brutality of the Assad regime. When we talk about Damascus and surrounding areas, that's where Assad terrorized the people. But when we move up north and go to northeastern Syria, that's where the PKK and YPG terrorist group are terrorizing people. People over there have become victims to their brutality. Have you spoken to any families in that part of the country? What are they telling you, Hassan?
That's right, Jafar. It seems that there is a bit of a rebellion against the SDF control. Now, remember that SDF is this umbrella organization under which the YPG terrorist organization forms a key component. What's been happening is, for example, if you move to the east of the country around Deir ez-Zor, this is where earlier a number of Arab tribes. They contacted the central government in Damascus and they said that they want to be liberated from SDF control. There was collaboration between the central government as well as those tribes who provided support. And you had the security forces of the new government, the interim government, moving in. And they took control of Deir ez-Zor city centre. But of course, there are some areas around Deir ez-Zor province that are still under the control of the SDF. Now, something similar is happening in parts of northeastern Syria as well, around Qamishli. And also another development that's been taking place is that, according to a number of tribal officials, a number of people who had been forcibly inducted into the YPG terrorist organization, they've managed to escape. They're giving us a figure of about 500 or so people, including some children as young as 14 and 15, who they say have managed to escape. They had been forcefully inducted into the YPG terrorist organization. We've tried to reach out to some of those families, but I think you can understand why they would be so reluctant to speak on camera, because it concerns the security of their children, their family members, and so forth. So it seems that people are basically trying to move away from that. But there's another challenge. If you've moved to the Manbij city, for example, which was earlier liberated from the YPG terrorist organization, this is where the security forces are saying that the YPG is trying to make a comeback. It's talking about the presence of some sleeper cells as well as some YPG terrorists who didn't leave that area earlier, despite the understanding that was reached with the interim setup. And they've carried out a terrorist explosion there as well, using a car blast, resulting in the deaths of at least 2 people. So they're saying that there is some commotion around there. There's an attempt by the YPG terrorist group to try to make a comeback around there, but they are determined to prevent that from happening.
Right, Hassan, of course, when we talk about Syria, terrorism is something that is posing a huge challenge to the country right now. And in order for the country to thrive, terrorism has to be removed from across the country. Now, I know Ankara has said on multiple occasions that it will be supporting the new Syrian administration when it comes to removing terror elements from the country. But I want to focus on the Syrian administration right now, the new interim government. What options do they have on the table to remove PKK, YPG elements from northern Syria?
Well, as far as the PKK and YPG elements are concerned, Jafar, the central administration has tried to make some effort to basically communicate with the SDF. Now, SDF, of course, remember, is the group that has the YPG terrorist component in it as well. And the centre is saying that there have been some messages from the SDF suggesting that they're willing to accept the authority of the centre. They're willing to sort of accept a setup in which there's going to be a powerful centre, but they're saying that there are others who are saying that they're not going to be accepting a centralized government, and they're talking about autonomy. Now, for the centre, the problem here is that they see the YPG terrorist organization as a separatist group as well, which poses a threat to the very territorial integrity of Syria. So they're saying that there can be no negotiations with any group that wants to break up the country. So that, of course, is a challenge. The hard power option is there. They can use military force, but at the moment, of course, they're still in the process of consolidating their authority. And one of the dangers is that you've got pockets of Daesh terrorist organization, for example, and in the past they're saying there has been some tactical collaboration between Daesh and the YPG. With YPG, you might recall back in 2019 and 2020, releasing hundreds of Daesh terrorists they had been holding. So Damascus is saying that the YPG is using the Daesh card to blackmail the West as well, to say that the West, especially the United States, should continue to provide support to the YPG terror group. So, of course, it is a very difficult situation that the centre is finding itself in.
Right, Hassan, before I let you go, you have followed the developments in northern Syria very closely over the past 3 weeks. Let me ask you, how have the dynamics changed in northern Syria since the fall of the Assad regime? Because here in Damascus, for example, there's a new administration, an interim setup in place, and of course, international community, more and more countries are reaching out to this administration to establish diplomatic ties. But how does that reflect on northern Syria?
Well, the dynamics in the north of the country have been quite different from the south, because remember that in the north you have a number of areas that had been liberated by Turkey many years ago, and you had many groups here who had called on Turkey to come in to intervene to remove first the Daesh terrorist organization that had been present in places like Al-Bab and Azaz, where I am, and many other areas. So Turkey first intervened, removed Daesh from here in a very short time span. Then Turkey removed the YPG terror group from many of these areas. So what we saw over the years that followed was a lot of development work that happened around Azaz. So for example, if you look at the property prices in Azaz, they've really shot up, and compared to some of the newly liberated parts of the country, properties here are pretty expensive because of the development work that's happened here. Turkish currency is operational here, and there's a lot of trade activity happening around here as well. So of course, the dynamics in the north have been different. But then, of course, you've got places in the north, places like Manbij and Tel Rafat, that have recently been liberated from the YPG terror group. So, of course, these are areas where there's a lot of development work that needs to be done. Tel Rafat in particular, it's just been razed to the ground, primarily as a result of the Russian bombing that was carried out back in 2016, and, of course, some of the activities of the YPG as well, when they were trying to target the opposition forces that were resisting YPG's advance.
Fascinating insights as always. That's Hassan Abdullah live for us from Azaz in Syria. Hassan, thank you very much indeed. And now let's go to another front of the story. Days after illegally expanding its military presence across the border in Syria, the Israeli military has carried out airstrikes at a village on the Syrian-Lebanese border, which it said was being used to smuggle weapons to the armed group Hezbollah. For more on this, let's bring in TRT World's Mohammed Al-Qasim, who joins me live from occupied Golan Heights. Qasim, good to see you. So every day Israel has been expanding its presence, its occupation in Golan Heights area, and today there are tensions on the Syrian-Lebanese border.
That's correct, Jafar. The accusations against Israel is coming not only from the Lebanese army, who has accused Israel for repeatedly violating the terms of the ceasefire in southern Lebanon, but also we're hearing from the United Nations peacekeepers, UNIFIL, that Israel is also violating the terms of the ceasefire in Lebanon, and it's not really carrying out its withdrawal of southern Lebanon as fast as it's supposed to. Now, keep in mind that we're only, it's 1 month of or 30 days of the 60 days of the ceasefire that was signed about a month ago has passed, and Israel has another month to withdraw its forces and let the monitoring body led by the US and other countries take over. And this will allow also in the process the Lebanese army as well as UNIFIL peacekeepers to take over in southern Lebanon. That hasn't happened. Israel continues to operate freely in southern Lebanon. On the latest strike is this one along the Syrian-Lebanese border on the village of Janta. Even though there is no official crossing on that part of the border, but it's a known border for smuggling weapons and other stuff. But Israel has been saying that it will not allow any weapons to be smuggled or leaving Syria into Lebanon to land in the hands of Hezbollah. But also we're seeing Israeli forces target different areas and even destroying some villages near the Israeli-Lebanese borders in what the Lebanese government as well as the UN has termed as a violation of the terms of the ceasefire. So the situation there, even though there is a standing ceasefire, but this is a fragile ceasefire, and as the accusations continue to pile on Israel that it's violating the terms of this truce, this may even go south if Israel doesn't withdraw its forces from southern Lebanon soon. Jafar?
Now, Mohammed, let me pick your brain on this one thing here. According to experts, Israel goals when it comes to Gaza and the occupied West Bank, they're very clear. I mean, Israel is aiming for a complete annihilation, ethnic cleansing in that region. But what is the end game for Israel in this region? What is it trying to do in your view?
Well, what Israel is trying to do in the Golan Heights and beyond is very clear, even though there's no official statements on that. But we know that Israeli forces have occupied the demilitarized zone between Israel and Syria. This is based on the 1974 disengagement agreement between the two sides brokered by the UN. Soon after the collapse, within hours, Jafar, Israel sent its troops and tanks into the demilitarized zone and occupied it, claiming that it doesn't want to see hostile forces get near the borders with Israel. Also, the part of the peak of Mount Hermon, one of the highest peaks in the region, Israeli forces have taken even the part that was manned by the former Syrian regime army, because the Syrian soldiers from the Syrian former Syrian army regime pulled out from there. But also we're seeing more and more Israeli tanks and forces beyond the demilitarized zone, beyond the buffer zone, 6 to 10 kilometers outside there, rolling through many villages, in some cases even forcing the villagers out of their villages. In other cases, they're just searching their homes for what Israel claims weapons that these villagers took from the former Syrian regime military bases. Jafar?
That's Mohammed Al-Qasim live for us from occupied Golan Heights. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed. Now, over the course of 8 special bulletins from Damascus, we have brought to you stories from every corner of Syria, with exclusive reports, interviews and voices from more than 5 correspondents on the ground. This journey was about highlighting the resilience and the plight of the Syrian people who have endured 13 years of war. Now, as a new chapter begins with the fall of the Assad regime, the challenges ahead are immense, but so is the hope. From all of us here in Damascus, this is goodbye for now. TRT World will continue to bring you their stories and keep you informed every step of the way. I'm Jafar Hassan. Thank you very much for watching.